I've always believed love takes many forms, quiet forms, loud forms, sometimes forms that don't look like what people expect. But in my family, love has rules, milestones, checkboxes. You graduate, you get married, you have a baby, then another. You host themed birthday parties and serve casseroles at potlucks. You keep the wheel turning. If you dare to step off it, well, they don't quite know what to do with you. I'm Maya Bennett, 38 years old, single, no kids. I work as a social worker for Child Protective Services in Atlanta. And to my family, that makes me a mystery, or worse, a failure. I'd barely stepped into the ballroom when I saw it. Balloons in pale pink and gold, champagne flutes clinking, and tables stacked with designer baby gear wrapped in ivory ribbons. My cousin Kimberly's second baby shower looked like a wedding. She'd rented out the event space of a historic hotel downtown, and someone had hired a harpist who was plucking away in the corner like we were about to crown a princess. "Darling, you made it," Kimberly squealed when she spotted me. Her bump was perfectly round under a white chiffon dress. She kissed both my cheeks like I was visiting royalty, not her cousin who lived 20 minutes away. "I wouldn't miss it," I said with a smile that felt slightly too tight. I handed over my gift, an embroidered baby blanket I'd ordered from a boutique in Savannah. "Oh, how cute," she said, barely glancing before passing it off to one of the attendants. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice. "Just so you know, Aunt Carol made homemade onesies." Again, I laughed politely. Kimberly was always performing, always making sure she was at the center of everything. I found a seat near the back, next to my cousin Monique and a few of the women I hadn't seen in months. The small talk flowed like punch. Mostly baby talk, due dates, gender reveals. One mom complained about how hard it was to find a trustworthy nanny. Another was debating whether to go with Montessori or bilingual immersion for preschool. I nodded when appropriate, smiled, sipped my drink, and then it happened. Across the room, Aunt Helen, in her usual floral blouse and pearls, leaned toward another relative and said, not quietly enough, "Bless Maya's heart, still the childless one." Someone giggled. Another chimed in, "Well, she's always been so career-focused." I froze. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it. It wouldn't be the last. But something about hearing it in that room, under crystal chandeliers and surrounded by pastel-colored joy, made it sting sharper. I felt like I'd been undressed in public. I forced a smile and pretended not to notice. That's what I'd always done. Pretend, nod, swallow the lump in my throat. But inside, I was wilting. They didn't know. They didn't know about the paperwork I'd filled out. The late nights reading books on attachment trauma and transracial parenting. The parenting classes I'd quietly been attending at the Y on weekends. They didn't know I'd been preparing a nursery in my modest condo, soft gray walls, little books lined up on shelves, a rocking chair I found at a vintage shop. They didn't know that last week I'd cried in my car after a home visit from the adoption caseworker, not because anything had gone wrong, but because it was finally starting to feel real. They didn't know that becoming a mother had been the truest, hardest, and most sacred dream of my life, and that I was chasing it alone. But none of that mattered in this room. Here, if you didn't have a ring and a stroller, you were unfinished. You were other. Kimberly called out names for her gift raffle. Laughter echoed as someone won a spa set. I excused myself to the restroom. In the mirror, I stared at my reflection. Chestnut curls pinned neatly, lipstick flawless, eyes tired. I whispered to myself, "You're not less," because I wasn't. I knew that. Even when they tried to shrink me down to a status, childless one, I knew who I was, what I was building, who I was becoming. Still, I didn't go back to the ballroom. I slipped out quietly and walked down Peachtree Street, letting the cool air soften the weight on my chest. At a coffee shop 2 blocks away, I sat with a chai latte and pulled up the photo on my phone. It was the ultrasound Jayla had sent me. A grainy image curved like a question mark. Not mine biologically, but one day soon. Mine. I touched the screen. "Hope," I whispered. The name I'd picked out long ago, because she was my hope, my becoming, my answer, and one day, maybe sooner than they thought, the world would see it too. It started one afternoon in early spring, a year before the baby shower. The trees outside my apartment window were just beginning to blush with new leaves, and the air smelled faintly of pollen and rain. I had just come home from a long day at work, 2 back-to-back emergency removals, and a court hearing for a boy who'd been bounced between 6 foster homes. I sat on the couch, shoes still on, holding a file that wasn't work-related for once. It was my own, the first official folder from the adoption agency. The glossy packet inside outlined everything: eligibility requirements, costs, training sessions, support groups. I ran my hand over the cover, the way you might touch something sacred. Because for me, this was sacred. This was the beginning of a dream I'd kept tucked away for years. When I was with Daniel, my ex, I had hinted at adoption a few times. He'd always smiled vaguely and said, maybe down the line. But when down the line came and I brought it up again, he laughed. "I want my kids," he said. "Not someone else's. I mean, come on, Maya, you know that's not real parenting." That was the night I ended it. We'd been together for almost 3 years. The truth was, I'd known for a while we weren't walking the same road. I wanted meaning, connection. He wanted convenience. Appearances. Still, the breakup cut deep, not just because I'd loved him, but because part of me had clung to the hope that we could build this dream together. After it ended, I grieved not only the relationship but the life I thought I'd been building. But grief has a way of clarifying things. And what I saw, once the fog cleared, was the truth I had buried for too long. I didn't want to wait anymore. I didn't want to put motherhood on hold because someone else wasn't ready. I wanted to be a mom, not eventually, not someday, but now. And I believed with everything in me that there was a child out there who needed me as much as I needed them. My job had shown me too much to think otherwise. Day after day, I watched children arrive in the system, scared, bruised, confused. Some had never known a warm meal or safe bed. Some had been told they were mistakes, burdens, throwaways. But I saw something else in them, potential, even when they couldn't see it themselves. I'd look into their eyes and think, if someone had loved you better from the start, I wanted to be that someone. The adoption process wasn't romantic. It was paperwork and fingerprints and interviews. I had to submit financial records, psychological assessments, letters of recommendation. I had to list every ex, every health scare, every flaw. There were parenting classes on trauma-informed care, seminars on navigating transracial adoption, webinars about openness, identity, loss. Some nights I went home exhausted, wondering if I was in over my head. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering, what if I fail? What if I can't do this alone? And yet, beneath the fear, there was something else, something stronger, certainty. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet and steady like a heartbeat. I knew this was the right path. When I told my mother I was applying to adopt, she looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Maya," she said, setting down her tea with a sharp clink, "you can't raise a child by yourself. You have no husband, no safety net." "I have a home, a job, a heart full of love," I replied, "and a calling." She shook her head. "Children need a family, not just a mother with good intentions." Her words stung. I tried to explain that family comes in many forms, that children need stability more than they need a two-parent photo on the mantle. But she didn't want to hear it. Neither did my aunties or cousins. "You're going to ruin your life," someone told me. "That child will grow up resenting you." So I stopped telling them. I kept my updates to myself, the glowing email from the agency after my home inspection, the tearful gratitude I felt when I passed my final parenting course. I bought baby clothes in secret and tucked them in a drawer. I kept a journal full of letters to the child I hadn't met yet. And every Sunday morning, I sat in the nursery I was slowly building, gray walls, pale yellow curtains, a mobile of stars I'd made by hand, and I prayed, not for the process to be fast, but for it to be right, for the connection to be real, for me to be ready. There were setbacks, of course, delays in paperwork, a profile match that fell through, a birth mother who chose another family. Each time felt like a breakup, but I didn't give up, because what they didn't know, what they'd never understand, is that motherhood isn't just about biology. It's about choice. Every day I chose this child. I chose this path. I chose love that didn't need to look like theirs. And someday, I believed with all my heart that love would choose me back. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the call came. I had just gotten back from a home visit and was sitting at my desk with a microwaved lunch I had no intention of eating. My phone buzzed with the agency's number, and I picked up out of habit, expecting a routine update. Instead, I heard my caseworker's voice, soft, steady, and holding back something big. "Maya," she said, "we have a birth mother who wants to speak with you." I froze. "She's in Chicago, 18 years old, due in about 3 weeks. Her name is Jayla." I blinked at the wall in front of me, heart thudding. "She read my file. She read your file, your letters, saw the nursery photos you submitted, and she asked for a meeting. She wants to meet you in person soon." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. I had trained myself not to get excited too early, to stay grounded, realistic. But there was something in my caseworker's tone, hope tempered by caution, that told me this was different. I exhaled slowly, trying to speak without cracking. "I'll go." 2 days later, I was on a flight to Chicago, seatbelt tight against my chest and a nervous flutter rising in my stomach with every mile. I kept picturing Jayla. I imagined someone small and scared, someone braver than I'd probably ever been. I thought about what it meant to be just a teenager, carrying a life, choosing to place that life in someone else's arms. I landed in the evening and went straight to the agency's office, a modest building on a quiet street near a community center. The waiting room smelled like lemons, scented wipes, and nerves. And then she walked in. Jayla. She wore an oversized hoodie stretched over her belly and had earbuds tangled around one hand. Her eyes met mine cautiously, wary, guarded, but curious. "Hi," I said, rising to my feet. "You're Maya," she replied, more statement than question. "That's me." She gave a small nod, then sat down across from me in the private meeting room. The caseworker left us alone. We sat in silence for a few minutes. She glanced at my hands, then the floor, then back at me. "You look different than I thought," she said finally. I smiled. "Better or worse?" "Better," she admitted. "You don't look desperate. Some of the other people look desperate." I softened. "I'm not here to take anything. I'm here to offer, there's a difference. That seemed to settle something between us. She opened up slowly, told me about her life, how her mom had worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford diapers, how her boyfriend had vanished when she told him she was pregnant, how she wanted more for her daughter than what she'd known. I'm not giving her up, she said firmly. I'm giving her a chance. I nodded. I understand. Then she pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack. I printed your letter, she said. The one you wrote to the birth mom. I've read it like 20 times. I felt my throat tighten. She read aloud a line I had barely remembered writing. This child will not grow up wondering if they were wanted. They will grow up knowing they were chosen. Jayla looked up at me then, tears balancing in her wide brown eyes. You wrote that like you meant it. I did, I whispered. Every word. She sat back in her chair, hand resting on her belly. You didn't talk about blood or genes. You talked about love, like real love. That's the only kind I know how to give. There was a long pause, a shift. I was scared you'd be too perfect, she said, like one of those shiny people with a husband and a dog and a Pinterest house. But you're not, I laughed, surprised. Definitely not. You feel real, like you've been through stuff, like you'd understand. I hope so, I said. And if you choose me, I'll do everything I can to understand. I'll show up every day. Another pause. Have you picked a name? She asked. I hesitated. I have one in mind. But I want to hear your thoughts first. She smiled faintly. Let me think on it. Before I left, I knelt beside her chair. I don't know what you'll decide, I told her, voice thick. But I want you to know something. If you choose me, your child will grow up in a home full of music and books and warm Sunday mornings. They'll know where they came from. They'll know how brave you were. And they'll never, ever doubt that they were loved by both of us. Jayla wiped a tear from her cheek. I believe you. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. Something had changed. For the first time in the entire process, I didn't feel like I was chasing a shadow or clinging to a maybe. For the first time, this felt real, possible, close. Her name floated into my mind again, Hope, because that's what Jayla had handed me with just one look, one conversation, one chance. Hope. And I was ready to hold it with both hands. I was folding laundry when the call came. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, and for a moment I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me knew this was it. It was the caseworker in Chicago. Her voice was calm but urgent. Jayla's in labor. She's at St. Catherine's Medical. She's asking for you. I didn't even think. I dropped the laundry on the floor, grabbed the go bag I'd packed weeks ago, just in case, and booked the next flight out. 5 hours later, I was stepping into a hospital room humming with fluorescent lights and quiet beeping machines. Jayla was already in active labor. Her face was pale, her hair damp with sweat, but when she saw me, she reached out a trembling hand. You came, she whispered. I told you I would. She nodded, clutching my hand with surprising strength. There were no doctors yet, just a nurse doing final checks and prepping the space. The contractions came hard and fast. I stayed by her side through every breath, every cry, every tremor that shook her small frame. No one teaches you how to witness a birth when the child isn't yours by blood, but somehow in those moments it didn't matter. It was hers. It was mine. It was ours in a way that transcended biology. Jayla didn't scream much. She was quiet, focused, fierce, brave in a way that only someone her age shouldn't have to be. Hours passed. The sun went down, and still we labored together, me at her side, her fingers gripping mine so tightly that I could barely feel them. And then came the cry. It wasn't loud at first, just a small wail like a bird startled from sleep. The doctor held up a tiny, slick body, red-faced and howling. A girl, he announced. Strong lungs. Jayla slumped back into the pillows, sobbing quietly. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. They wrapped the baby in a white and pink blanket and placed her in Jayla's arms first. She stared at the infant for a long time, so long I thought maybe she'd changed her mind. But then, with tears streaking her face, she looked up at me and smiled faintly. Do you want to hold her? I stepped forward slowly, like I was approaching a miracle. My hands shook as I took the tiny bundle into my arms. She was perfect. All dark curls and squishy cheeks and the smallest hands I'd ever seen. And just like that, my heart broke open and rearranged itself around her. Jayla watched me for a moment, then whispered, her name is yours to choose. I blinked through tears. Are you sure? She nodded. I looked down at the baby girl in my arms and whispered the name I'd held in my heart for so long. Hope Elise Bennett. Jayla smiled again, and for a moment there was peace. No paperwork, no loss, just 2 women and the child that connected them. Later that day, the legal forms were brought in. Jayla asked for a few minutes alone before signing. I stepped into the hallway, cradling Hope against my chest. When I returned, Jayla had signed. She was crying, but not in regret, in release. I want pictures, she said, and updates. I want to know she's okay. You'll get them, I promised. I'll write to you every month if you want. And when she's older, if she wants to know more, I'll make sure she does. She nodded. I'm not her mom anymore, but I'll always be her beginning. Those words stayed with me, still do. The next 48 hours were a blur of paperwork, hospital discharge forms, last-minute baby supplies, and a deeply emotional goodbye between Jayla and Hope. I held it together until I was alone on the plane with my daughter tucked into a carrier on my chest. Only then did I let the tears fall freely, not just from joy, but from the weight of it all. Hope slept the entire flight, tiny and curled against my chest like she knew exactly where she belonged. Her breath was warm, rhythmic, grounding. And I was a mother now, a mother with a bottle bag in one hand, a birth certificate in her suitcase, and a lifetime of promises ahead. When we landed in Atlanta, the world felt the same, but I wasn't. I drove us home through the quiet streets just after dawn. The city still slept as I parked in front of my building, climbed the stairs with trembling arms, and stepped into the nursery I had dreamed about for so long. It wasn't fancy, just soft colors, hand-me-down furniture, and books I couldn't wait to read aloud. I laid Hope in the crib and sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall. We were home, but the joy was tangled with something else, dread, because I knew what was coming. My family didn't know yet. They didn't know I'd left town, didn't know I had crossed state lines and come home with a baby girl. They didn't know I had become a mother without their permission, without their blessing. And I wasn't sure how they'd react when they found out. Would they say I stole someone else's child? Would they belittle the love I carried like they belittled everything else? Would they ever see Hope as mine? I looked down at her again, sleeping peacefully under the mobile. And I knew, no matter what they said, I was ready. Because I hadn't become a mother for them, I had become one for her. I should have known better. But some part of me still believed, hoped, that showing them would soften things. That maybe, just maybe, once they saw her tiny fingers and sleepy smile, they'd see what I saw, that they'd open their hearts. A week after bringing Hope home, I dressed her in a pale yellow onesie with little stitched bumblebees. I wrapped her in a cotton blanket and strapped her into her carrier. Her pacifier bobbed rhythmically in her mouth as she slept, blissfully unaware of the storm she was about to be born into. The family brunch was at Aunt Carol's place, a casual Sunday get-together, just a few relatives, coffee, biscuits, and chatter. The kind of thing I used to attend out of obligation, rarely out of joy. I told myself I wouldn't make a scene, just show up, introduce Hope, let them meet her, let them see. When I walked through the front door, the first thing that hit me was the smell of cinnamon and bacon. The second was silence. I stepped into the living room, carrier in hand, and it was like I'd brought a ghost instead of a baby. All eyes landed on the blanket-covered bundle in my arms. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Kimberly, seated on the couch with her perfectly pregnant belly, narrowed her eyes. My mother stood by the coffee table, one hand resting on a plate of deviled eggs. Her expression turned from surprise to something sharper, disbelief laced with frost. I smiled gently and said, "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my daughter. This is Hope Elise." Still silence. Finally, my mother spoke. Her voice was cold, controlled. "You didn't even ask us." "Ask you?" I repeated, confused. "Ask us what you were doing. Going off, adopting a child like this. You didn't include us. You didn't even tell us." "I wasn't aware I needed permission to become a mother," I said quietly. She crossed her arms. "You didn't even discuss it, Maya. We're your family." "Exactly," I said, my voice trembling. "You're my family. You should have supported me, but instead you made it clear I wasn't enough unless I did it your way." Kimberly let out a short laugh. "So now you're a mom, just like that. That's not the same as giving birth, Maya. You skip the hard part." I felt my face flush. "Do you think love only counts if it comes with stretch marks and a hospital bracelet?" Kimberly smirked. "It counts when it's real." I looked around the room, faces I'd known my whole life now frozen in a kind of quiet judgment. No one came forward. No one asked to hold her. No one said her name. Hope stirred in her carrier and let out a small sigh. I bent down instinctively to soothe her, and that's when I knew. They didn't see her as mine. They saw her as a prop in my rebellion, an accessory to my refusal to follow their script. I stood up slowly, gathering the blanket around Hope. "Well," I said, my voice stronger than I expected, "we just wanted to stop by. I thought family would want to meet her, but I see now, we're not welcome here." No one stopped me as I turned toward the door, not even my mother. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with Hope cradled in my arms, a bottle in one hand and the weight of rejection pressing down on my chest. She drank contentedly, her small fingers curling around mine. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, soft, dark, trusting. I'd never felt more protective or more tired. I needed to breathe, to release what I couldn't say in that room, so I picked up my phone. I opened my social media apps, something I rarely used for anything personal, and uploaded a photo I'd taken of Hope earlier that morning. She was lying on her back, one arm flung over her head like a tiny diva, the blanket kicked halfway off her feet. Her expression was pure peace. Then I typed, "They called me the childless one. I call myself Mom, and this is Hope." I hit post. I didn't expect anything. I just needed to say it out loud to claim her and myself, but something happened. Within an hour, the post had a few dozen likes, then a few hundred. Comments poured in, friends from college, coworkers, even old classmates I barely remembered. This made me cry. "She's beautiful, Maya. So beautiful. You're the kind of mother this world needs." Then came the message from Tasha, a former client turned friend who now worked as a producer at a national news outlet. She sent me a DM, "Maya, I saw your post. I showed it to my editor. We're doing a piece on modern motherhood. Would you be open to sharing your story? I stared at the message for a long time. Hope stirred beside me, letting out a sleepy yawn. I looked at her, then back at the screen, and I smiled, because maybe it didn't matter what that room of relatives thought. Maybe love didn't need their blessing to be real. Maybe this little girl, born of another woman's body and cradled now in mine, was about to show the world that motherhood isn't one size fits all. And I was ready to tell that story. I was burping hope after a 3 a.m. feeding when the email arrived. I caught the subject line between bleary eyes and a spit-up cloth. CNN Human Interest Request Modern Motherhood Series. At first, I thought it was spam, but the sender's name rang a faint bell. Monica Reyes, a journalist I'd seen on a weekend feature months ago, interviewing a woman who'd started a free clinic in rural Alabama. Her pieces were always raw, kind, and deeply human. I opened it. Dear Miss Bennett, we came across your story via social media, and it moved our entire team. We're working on a segment highlighting different paths to motherhood and would love to feature you and your daughter, Hope, in an upcoming episode. Would you be open to a brief call? I stared at the screen, Hope tucked against my shoulder, her tiny breaths warming my neck. For a moment, I hesitated. This wasn't what I'd planned. I'd wanted to keep things quiet, sacred. A soft life, not a viral one. And yet, there was something in Monica's tone, respectful, intentional, that felt different from the judgment I'd come to expect. I responded with a simple, yes, I'd be honored to talk. We spoke later that morning while Hope napped in her bassinet. Monica's voice was gentle, not the polished veneer of a news anchor, but the warmth of someone who listens for a living. She asked about my decision to adopt, about Jayla, about what it felt like to walk into a room and be told, without words, that your motherhood didn't count. I told her everything. I told her about the nursery I built alone, the paperwork I filled out by lamplight, the moment I held Hope for the first time and knew, deep in my bones, that we were each other's. Monica didn't interrupt. She just said softly, people need to hear this. They sent a small crew a few days later, just 2 people, respectful, unobtrusive. They filmed me reading Goodnight Moon to Hope, bottle feeding her in the soft light of early morning. They recorded audio of me speaking about love, not just the sweet kind, but the deliberate kind, the kind you choose again and again, even when no one applauds. We sat on my worn living room couch while I explained what it means to be a mother who didn't give birth but gives everything else. I thought maybe a few hundred people would see the segment. I was wrong. The piece aired on a Thursday evening, tucked between a piece on school lunches and a documentary on rising sea levels. I watched it from my couch, Hope curled on my chest. They had edited it beautifully, soft piano music underscoring my narration, shots of Hope's sleepy face, a slow pan of the nursery, the words, "This is Hope," scrawled in white letters on the screen. Then my voice. They said I wasn't a mother because I didn't give birth, but this child, she's mine, not because of blood, because of love. The screen faded to black. I sat in silence, tears slipping down my cheeks, and then my phone started buzzing. At first it was just friends and coworkers, texts like, "You had me crying in my living room." I showed my mom. She said, "You're exactly what a mother should be. Your daughter is beautiful, and so are you." Then came the shares. A local author posted the segment, writing, "This woman's story cracked something open in me." A celebrity chef commented, "Every kind of mother deserves a seat at the table. Maya, you're the real deal." By morning, it had over 2 million views online. Adoption advocates reached out. Podcasts asked for interviews. A pediatrician in Vermont sent a message saying, "I'm printing your quote to hang in our clinic." One message stopped me cold. It came from a woman in Kentucky. "I'm 41. I never had kids. I thought it was too late. But after watching your story, I called an agency today. Thank you for showing me another way." I read that one twice, then once more, just to let it settle into the cracks of all the things I'd once doubted. I looked down at Hope, who was kicking in her blanket, grunting in that tiny, determined way she did before every bottle. "You hear that?" I whispered. "You're already changing the world." Later that night, I scrolled through the comments section on the CNN post. I knew better, but curiosity got the best of me. Most were kind, empathetic, beautiful, but there were others. "That's not her real kid. Single women shouldn't be allowed to adopt. What's going to happen when the birth mom changes her mind?" I let those sink in, but not settle, because I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for Hope, and for every woman like me who sat through baby showers as the childless one, believing they didn't belong. Now, people were seeing us, really seeing us, and I realized that telling my story, our story, wasn't just about proving myself. It was about making space for others, for love that doesn't fit a mold, for families that begin in waiting rooms, not wombs, for mothers who choose every single day to show up without applause. That night, I tucked Hope into her crib, kissed her forehead, and whispered the same thing I'd said the day she was born: "You were chosen. And you are loved." And now, the whole world knew it too. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be standing on a stage at a parenting conference, microphone clipped to my collar and Hope's tiny photo projected behind me, I would have laughed. Not out of disbelief, just because it would have felt so far from where I started. But here I was, sharing my story to a room full of people, educators, adoptive parents, social workers, foster moms, and curious strangers who had seen the CNN segment and wanted to hear more. I spoke about choosing motherhood with intention, about finding strength in silence, and about the different ways families are made, not just through biology but through bravery. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told the truth about the paperwork, the sleepless nights, the fear of not being seen as enough. But I also told them how hope curled against my chest every morning like she knew she belonged there, like her heart had found the rhythm it was always meant to beat with. Afterward, a woman came up to me in tears. "My daughter's birth mom is 17, she said. "Thank you for reminding me that this connection, this whole journey, is sacred, not second best." It wasn't just the conferences. My workplace, where I'd spent over a decade advocating for vulnerable children, invited me to speak at their annual summit. They gave me an award for advocacy through action. I accepted it humbly, holding Hope in one arm as she gnawed on the corner of the certificate. She didn't know it, but she was part of every sentence I spoke. My coworkers decorated my office with tiny handprints and a banner that read, "Welcome, Hope." And in that moment, I realized that family could grow in the most unexpected places. It didn't have to be bound by blood. It could be made of colleagues who brought diapers and bottles to meetings, of neighbors who dropped off casseroles on hard days, of women I'd never met who emailed from across the world calling me sister in motherhood. A few weeks after the CNN feature aired, I got a message from my cousin Lydia, Kimberly's younger sister. "Hey Maya, I owe you an apology. I watched your interview and," I cried, "I had no idea what you'd been carrying. You didn't deserve how we treated you. Hope is lucky we were wrong." Another came from Uncle James, "Proud of you. Didn't say it earlier, but I've always admired how you walk your own path." Even Aunt Carol, queen of the homemade onesies and unsolicited advice, mailed me a card. Inside was a photo of a quilt she was working on, embroidered with the name Hope Elise. There was no grand apology from the whole family, no red carpet rolled out, but it didn't matter. The ones who saw me now, truly saw me, were the ones who mattered. And then one evening, Kimberly's name flashed across my phone screen. A single text, "Guess you proved us wrong." I stared at it for a long time. No warmth, no accountability, just the bare bones of a concession, brittle and begrudging. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, I wasn't, not anymore, but because I had nothing to prove anymore. I wasn't chasing validation from people who measured love with rules and timelines. I had hope, I had our life, and that was more than enough. The weeks blurred into months. Hope began to grow into her name. She was the kind of baby who laughed with her whole body, head tilted back, fists in the air. Her giggle was sunshine bottled up. She loved being read to. She'd babble back at the pages like she was arguing with the characters. Her first word wasn't mama or dada, it was book, which, honestly, felt right for both of us. The midnight feedings turned into dawn cuddle sessions. Her first giggle came when I accidentally sneezed with oatmeal on my face. Her first steps happened between the couch and my outstretched arms, her balance wobbly but determined. I caught it all on video. Not to share online, just to keep, to remember, to revisit when time moved too fast. Each moment cemented something deeper. I was her mother, not because a court said so, not because of genetics, but because every day I woke up and chose her, and she, in her own way, chose me back. Sometimes I still think about that baby shower, the sting of being labeled the childless one. It feels like a different lifetime, not because I've forgotten, but because I've rewritten the story. In my version, that label didn't define me, it ignited me. It led me to hope. It turned whispered insults into something powerful. I'm not the childless one. I'm the one who said yes when it was hard, the one who showed up, the one who redefined what family means, not just for myself, but for the thousands who have reached out, whispering me too. And when I rock hope to sleep at night, I don't think about who didn't show up for us. I think about the little girl in my arms, her breath even, her grip strong, her future wide open. Because family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you grow with, who shows up and who stays, and I was here. For every cry, every giggle, every step, I was mom in every way that mattered. Exactly 1 year after I first held Hope in my arms, I threw a party. Not a baby shower, not a birthday, though balloons were involved and there was plenty of cake. We called it Forever Family Day, a celebration not of where she came from, but of where she stayed. The day her adoption became official. The day her last name became Bennett on paper, though it had always been stitched to my heart. I sent out invitations printed in soft watercolor. 1 year of love, laughter, and learning together. Join us to celebrate our forever family. I wasn't sure who would come. I had stopped expecting anything from people long ago. But I planned the day with care anyway, as if every seat would be filled. We decorated the park pavilion near our neighborhood. There were sunflowers on every table, my mother's favorite flower, which felt complicated but somehow right. I set up a little photo wall with prints from our first year together. Hope's first gummy smile, her first trip to the zoo, her curled up asleep on my chest after teething all night. All the tiny, ordinary moments that made up the most extraordinary year of my life. I wore a yellow sundress and carried Hope on my hip, both of us radiant in our own ways. To my surprise, people came. Friends, of course, my coworkers from the department, other adoptive parents from the support group, my neighbor Gloria, who had become Hope's unofficial grandmother, but also some family. Lydia came, bringing a board book wrapped in pink ribbon. Uncle James brought deviled eggs and gave me a long, emotional hug. Even Aunt Carol showed up, carrying a quilt stitched with Hope's name, surrounded by little applique stars. And then, late into the afternoon, I saw her, my mother. She stood near the edge of the crowd, hands clasped in front of her, unsure, hesitant, watching. Hope toddled toward her, still mastering her balance, and stopped right at her feet. My mother slowly bent down, unsure of what to do. Hope lifted her arms, and my mother, proud, guarded, traditional to the bone, picked her up. She didn't say much, but she held her. That was enough for now. We ate under the shade of old oak trees, Hope bouncing between laps and picnic blankets. There was a banner that read 1 year of forever and a cupcake tower that had more frosting on faces than in mouths. When the sun began to lower and the golden light stretched across the grass, Gloria stood up with a raised glass of sweet tea. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, smiling at me. "I've watched Maya and Hope every day from my porch, through sleepless nights, scraped knees, bedtime songs, and diaper disasters. And I want to say this," she looked around, voice steady. "She wasn't born from your body, Maya, but she was born from your bravery. And Hope is lucky, so lucky." I couldn't stop the tears even if I tried. The applause was soft, warm, full of something I once believed I'd never have from others, belonging. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were stacked by the sink, I stood in Hope's nursery with the lights dimmed low. She was fast asleep in her crib, her thumb tucked in her mouth and her blanket pulled up to her chin. I sat in the rocking chair and let the silence settle around us. 1 year. 1 whole year since I flew to Chicago with trembling hands and an open heart. 1 year since I stepped into a delivery room and watched the first breath of a baby I had never met but already loved. 1 year since I cradled Hope and whispered her name for the first time, Hope Elise Bennett, a name chosen with the weight of dreams and the promise of a future neither of us could yet imagine. I thought about the path that brought us here, the baby shower where I was called the childless one, the hospital room where Jayla, through tears and courage, gave me the gift of forever, the hallway of silence when I introduced Hope to my family for the first time and walked out stronger for it, the night I posted that photo and accidentally changed more than just our story, the moment CNN told the world what love without permission looked like. And now, this day, this celebration, this small miracle of 2 hearts made one. People talk about how motherhood changes you, and they're right, but it didn't arrive for me in the expected ways. There were no morning sickness announcements, no pink and blue themed parties, no ultrasound photos taped to the fridge, but what I got was something else, something chosen, something earned, something built moment by beautiful moment. Hope stirred in her sleep, and I leaned forward to gently adjust her blanket. My fingers brushed her cheek, soft and warm. I whispered, "You made me a mother." Then I sat back in the rocking chair, eyes on her, a smile rising in my chest, because the truth was clear now. Motherhood didn't arrive the way they expected. It arrived exactly how I needed it to.